The town of Eldridge was small, tucked away between rolling hills and dense woods. The people there knew each other well, sharing stories and secrets over coffee at the local diner. But there was one story that sent shivers down their spines. A tale about the forest that loomed at the edge of town. It was said that the forest was alive, watching, waiting. No one ventured into its depths after dark. The trees stood tall and twisted, their branches like gnarled fingers reaching for the sky. Locals whispered of strange sounds echoing through the trees, of shadows that moved when they shouldn't. Children dared each other to approach the forest's edge, but never crossed it. They believed that something wicked lay within. One chilly autumn evening, a newcomer arrived in Eldridge. Her name was Clara. She was a writer, seeking inspiration for her next novel. Clara had heard the whispers about the forest and felt drawn to it. The townsfolk warned her, but her curiosity overshadowed their fears. She decided to explore the forest, convinced that it would spark her creativity. The sun dipped below the horizon as she made her way to the forest's edge. The trees stood like sentinels, their trunks thick and dark. Clara took a deep breath, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. She stepped inside, the crunch of leaves beneath her feet breaking the silence. At first, the forest seemed peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground. Birds chirped, and a gentle breeze rustled the branches. Clara walked deeper, her notebook in hand, jotting down her thoughts. She imagined the stories hidden within the trees, the secrets they held. But as she wandered further, the atmosphere changed, the air grew heavy, and the light dimmed. Clara felt an unsettling presence, as if the forest was watching her. She shook off the feeling, attributing it to her imagination. After all, she was a writer. She thrived on the eerie and unknown. Hours passed, and Clara realized she had strayed too far. She turned to retrace her steps, but the forest seemed different now. The paths twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the woods. Panic began to creep in. She called out, hoping someone would hear her, but only silence answered. As darkness fell, the forest transformed. Shadows danced between the trees, and the sounds of the night grew louder. Clara's heart raced. She quickened her pace, desperate to find her way back. That's when she heard it, a low, haunting whisper that seemed to echo from all around her. Stay with US. Clara froze, fear coursing through her. She glanced around, but there was no one there. The whisper continued, soft yet insistent. Stay with US. She stumbled backward, her breath quickening. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches twisting like skeletal hands. Clara turned and ran, adrenaline pushing her forward. But the forest was a maze, and every direction felt wrong. Suddenly she tripped over a root and fell hard to the ground. Pain shot through her ankle, but she pushed herself up, determined to escape. That's when she saw them figures lurking between the trees, their forms indistinct but unmistakably human. They watched her with hollow eyes, their faces pale and expressionless. Join us, one of them said, its voice barely above a whisper. Clara's heart raced as she stumbled back, her mind racing. She had to get out. She turned and ran, her thoughts a chaotic blur. The figures followed her, gliding silently through the trees. She could hear their whispers growing louder, filling her mind with dread. Stay with US. She burst through the underbrush, desperate to find the edge of the forest. The trees seemed to close in, their branches clawing at her clothes. Clara pushed forward, her breath ragged and shallow. Finally, she saw a sliver of moonlight ahead. It was the edge of the forest, but as she reached for it, the ground beneath her gave way. Clara fell into darkness, tumbling down a steep slope. She landed hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. Dazed, she looked around. She was in a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. The whispers returned, echoing in her mind. You must choose. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. Choose what? She looked around, panic rising within her. The figures emerged from the shadows, their faces now clearer. They were people from Eldridge, their eyes vacant and lost. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness. In the center of the clearing stood an old stone altar, covered in moss and vines. Clara approached it cautiously, her heart pounding. As she neared, she noticed strange markings carved into the stone, symbols she didn't recognize. Clara recognized them, friends, neighbors, even the diner owner. They were trapped, bound to the forest. Join us, they pleaded, their voices a haunting chorus. Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, I won't stay. But the forest responded. The trees creaked and groaned, the ground trembling beneath her. The figures moved closer, their hands reaching out. Clara backed away, her heart racing. She had to escape. She turned and ran, the whispers chasing her. The forest twisted around her, the path shifting as she fled. She could feel the presence behind her, the figures closing in. Stay with US. Clara burst through the trees, finally breaking free into the moonlight. She stumbled into a clearing, gasping for breath. But the relief was short-lived. The figures stood at the edge of the forest, their hollow eyes fixed on her. Join us, they whispered, their voices echoing in the night. Clara turned to run again, but the ground beneath her feet felt unstable. She stumbled, falling to her knees. Desperation clawed at her heart. She had to escape. Suddenly, she heard a voice, a familiar one. Clara, it was her friend Jake who had come looking for her. Relief washed over her as she scrambled to her feet. Jake, help me. He rushed toward her, but as he got closer, Clara noticed something was off. His eyes were dull, his expression vacant. You should have stayed, Clara, he said, his voice eerily calm. Now you can't leave. Panic surged through her. No, you're not Jake. She turned to run, but the figures were closing in, their whispers growing louder. Stay with US. Clara sprinted back into the forest, the darkness swallowing her whole. She could hear the footsteps behind her, the whispers echoing in her ears. She had to find a way out. She ran until her legs burned, until her lungs felt like they would burst. Finally, she stumbled upon a narrow path, barely visible in the dark. She took it, hoping it would lead her to safety. The forest felt alive, the trees shifting and closing in around her. She could feel the presence behind her, the figures lurking just out of sight. Join US. Clara pushed forward, fear driving her. The path twisted and turned, but she kept going, refusing to look back. Just when she thought she would be lost forever, she saw a faint light ahead. Hope surged within her. She ran toward it, her heart pounding. As she neared the light, she realized it was the edge of the forest. She burst through the trees, stumbling onto the road that led back to Eldridge. Relief washed over her, but the whispers lingered in her mind. Stay with us. Clara turned to look back at the forest, its dark silhouette looming against the night sky. The figures stood at the edge, their hollow eyes watching her. She felt a chill run down her spine as she realized they were still calling to her, their voices echoing in her mind. She ran back to town, her heart racing. The diner was still open, the warm light spilling out into the night. She rushed inside, the familiar faces greeting her with concern. But Clara felt different. The forest had changed her. Days passed, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She avoided the woods, but the whispers haunted her dreams. She tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. The forest had taken something from her, something she couldn't define. One evening, as she sat in the diner, she overheard a group of locals talking about the forest. They spoke of a new disappearance, another person who had ventured too far. Clara's heart sank. She knew the truth: the forest was hungry, and it wouldn't stop until it had what it wanted. That night, Clara lay in bed, unable to sleep. The whispers filled her mind, growing louder. Stay with us. She covered her ears, but it was no use. The forest was calling her back. The next morning, she made a decision. She would return to the forest, confront whatever lay within. She couldn't let it take anyone else. Clara gathered her things, determination fueling her steps as she headed toward the woods. As she crossed the threshold, the air felt different. The forest was alive, pulsing with energy. She walked deeper, the whispers growing louder, guiding her. Stay with us. Clara reached the clearing with the altar, her heart pounding. The figures emerged from the shadows, their eyes fixed on her. You've come back, one of them said, a twisted smile on its face. I won't join you, Clara shouted, her voice echoing in the stillness. Join us, they chanted, their voices a haunting melody. But Clara stood her ground. I'm not afraid of you, she yelled, the words tumbling from her lips. I won't let you take me. The forest trembled, the trees groaning in response. Clara felt a surge of power within her, a light igniting in her heart. You won't win, she declared, raising her arms. The figure recoiled, their expressions shifting from hunger to confusion. Clara focused on the light within her, letting it grow. You can't have me, she shouted, the words echoing through the forest. The ground shook, and the whispers turned to screams. The figures writhed, their forms flickering like shadows. Clara felt the energy around her shift, the forest responding to her defiance. With one final cry, she unleashed the light within her, sending it forth like a wave. The forest erupted in chaos, the trees bending and twisting as the figures shrieked in agony. Clara felt the darkness retreat, the whispers fading into the night. As the last echoes of their cries faded, Clara stood alone in the clearing, breathless but victorious. The forest felt different now, lighter somehow. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. With a final glance at the altar, Clara turned and made her way back through the trees. The whispers were gone, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. She had broken the forest's hold, freeing those who had been trapped. When she reached the edge of the woods, Clara looked back one last time. The forest stood silent, its dark secrets buried deep within. She knew she had won, but the memory of the whispers would linger forever. Clara returned to Eldridge, her heart full of hope. She would write her story not just of fear but of courage. The forest would no longer haunt her dreams, it would serve as a reminder of the strength within her. And as the sun set over the town, Clara knew that she had truly escaped the forest's grasp. But somewhere deep in the woods, the shadows remained, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too far.